So what are some of the issues that a seller should consider prior to selling their house or their real estate? Well, first and foremost, folks, what I usually do is discuss the whole issue of capital gains with my clients. Now, when it comes to the issue of capital gains, if you're selling your primary residence, there's some qualifying factors there, but in general, there's a $250,000 capital gains exclusion for each individual, $500,000 for a married couple. And so what that basically means is that you can make a gain up to $250,000 on your primary home without paying capital gains. Or if you're married, $500,000. There are qualifying factors, but in general, that's the first issue we discuss. Now, if it's an investment property, which we'll discuss some issues as we go here, if it's an investment property, then there's always a consideration for capital gains because it's an investment property. If you make a gain on an investment, there's always a capital gain issue in the year that you sell that asset. Now, with an investment property, there is the possibility that you can defer your capital gain. It's called a like-kind exchange or a 1031 exchange, and that's a possibility that I discuss with sellers, and that should be something a seller would consider prior to selling a house or real estate. Now, whether the property is a multifamily, a single family, or a condominium, if there are tenants involved, there are a whole list of issues that I discuss with clients and things that a seller should consider. One of which is, well, are you intending to deliver the property to the buyer vacant? Now, if that's the case, you have to make sure that there's enough time in the purchase and sale or in the contract to allow you to have the tenant vacate the property, whether it's through an agreement or an eviction, which is a whole nother matter. Now, if the tenants are staying, then there's another list of issues that we have to consider. First of all, we will need a rent roll. The buyer will request a rent roll, and that's going to involve the names of the tenants, where they're located, the amount of rent that they pay per month, and whether there are any deposits being held. That's all going to have to be taken into account at the time of the closing. If there are existing leases with these tenants, then those will have to be produced for the buyer so that the buyer can show them to the buyer's bank if there's a bank involved, or the buyer is buying cash, then the leases would need to be shown to the buyer so that buyer's counsel could review those contracts to make sure that there isn't any issues there. Now, on the tenant side of things, often a buyer's attorney would request something in the form of an estoppel certificate. And what an estoppel certificate is a certification. It's a statement by the tenant on the property that the seller is not in any violation of the tenant's agreements or the tenancy arrangements. And that would need to be signed by the tenants. So this is also a consideration for a seller. Now, straight across the board, at least in Massachusetts, but I'm suspecting in many other states, if the property has one water meter, then there'll have to be a final water reading at the time of the closing. If a condo unit, for instance, is separately metered, and that would mean that the water bill is not covered under the monthly condo fee, then there would need to be a final water reading for that unit as well. So this is straight across the board. Another issue that the seller should consider is whether the property has enough smoke detectors on the premises, and in Massachusetts at least, carbon monoxide detectors for fossil fuels. All of these things would need to be produced at the time of closing, and the seller would be responsible. Now, for related videos and definitions of some of these concepts, I've included some links to my previous videos in the description of this video, so make sure you check those out. Now, a seller also needs to consider what they're going to do in order to properly stage the property, the real estate. That would be cosmetic repairs, usually, or cosmetic work, usually to the house, painting, dressing up the curb appeal to the house. These are all things that will help in the sale price of the property. Now, once again, these are just some of the issues that a seller should consider when they're going to list a piece of real estate for sale. a lot of these issues are covered in much more detail with myself and the clients as the issues arise. Now, if you're watching me on Facebook, make sure that you like the video. If you're watching me on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe in the lower right-hand corner. Also, check out the links to the prior videos inside the description of this video. If you're watching me on Facebook, those usually are above. And some of my past videos will be showing up here. You'll see a list here and related videos. Make sure you check those out as well. Dave Ceruolo, CeruoloLaw.com.